Franzen's goal was not to create a portrait of the time. His idea was to create a compelling, emotionally intense story that would reach the largest number of people possible. He succeeded. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. How are y'all doing? Freedom, the concept, may be overrated. Freedom, the book, is not. Maybe you've heard about the tyranny of choice. If you have 4 or 5 choices, then the solution is going to be fairly easy. If you have 40 or 50, then life gets exponentially more difficult. The most happiness, appreciation, satisfaction I have ever had, all came from self-imposed restriction, discipline, and structure. The irony, of course, is that to receive the benefits, you have to choose to restrict yourself. You have to have these self-imposed limits. Though we all have these self-imposed limits anyway, so it's not like that's anything new. I guess it's like the difference between the right ones and the wrong ones. You must choose to limit yourself. You must choose to restrict yourself instead of feeling that you have been forced. So we need at least the freedom to choose whether or not we restrict ourselves. So I guess we must have the one freedom to limit our freedom. I don't know. I once single-handedly ruined an entire Thanksgiving family dinner by opening this philosophical black hole when we were just having a nice discussion. I said, "What is freedom?" And if you are ever in need of shutting down some sort of family event and you've gone through politics and religion and that hasn't worked, this is your best bet. You can shut down anything with this one. What is freedom, Dad? What is freedom, Mom? What is it? What is it really? What is it really? What is freedom really? Are any of us free? I bet if Jonathan Franzen doesn't hear this word for the rest of his life, he's going to be fine. Freedom, the concept, was not what initially sparked Franzen's interest in this story. Though maybe, freedom, the way W pronounces it, did. However, I don't want you to read this because of the intellectualization or like the notion of freedom or like the hypocrisies or the contradictions therein. No, I want you to read this book because it is a great story. Freedom details the quiet, catastrophic failures of a post-9/11 American Midwest upper-middle-class family. Franzen prefers families as this vessel in which to explore relationships between humans. Our main character is the effete and politically correct Walter Berglund, a hard-working do-gooder liberal with environmentally driven ambitions. From humble beginnings with a pessimistic Swedish heritage, like Franzen himself. The other players are his wife Patty, a competitive former athlete when she was much younger. His best friend Richard Katz, a street punk musician turned into a highly successful New York-based darling of Pitchfork indie musician, much to his chagrin. Lalitha, Walter's assistant, and Walter and Patty's children, Joey and Jessica. These are the main characters, and we become intimately acquainted with their motivations, neuroses, desires, kindnesses, and cruelty. We see what happens when you settle in life, when you keep secrets from the ones that you love or claim to love, when you compete with your family, when you can't express yourself sexually, when you know what the right thing to do is, yet you are overwhelmingly compelled to do wrong because we are all selfish. We all want to be wanted and loved in some capacity. We all want to be fulfilled. We all want to have a life that was worth living, that we felt was worth living, that we were satisfied by, or at least had moments of satisfaction. And because we're all going to die. Because we are all going to die very soon. Overarching theme in Franzen's work. Overarching theme in any great author's work. You've heard this story before, but never have you been able to read so deeply into the inner mechanisms that cause people, whom you can easily empathize with, to do what they do to hurt other people. And people that they love. The book, in Franzens' own words, is about irreconcilable conflicts, anxieties, and the unrealizable desires of middle-class people from the Midwest. There's a hazardous sadness to the first sounds of someone else's work in the morning. It's as if stillness experiences pain in being broken. The first minute of the workday reminds you of all the other minutes that a day consists of, and it's never a good thing to think of minutes as individuals. Said the author of American Psycho, Bret Easton Ellis. His new novel, Franzens Freedom, is the best American novel I've read in maybe 20 years. Major novel. Not only a major piece of storytelling or piece of narrative, but as a statement of purpose, it's a hugely important novel. Just by the very nature of what it insists the novel can be. I think that I heard Ellis on his podcast say that when he finished Freedom, he curled up and cried. Which, the author of American Psycho, curled up in a ball of tears. That's the book I want to read. So I did, and it was amazing. There was a lot of hubbub about the novel when it was first released, something I missed, because this is actually my first foray into Franzen. I haven't read the corrections, and I haven't read his first book. I think he only has four or five. Well, he just had Purity that came out, which I bought just off of how much I liked this. So if you want to read his new one, which I think came out this year, check out Purity. And but definitely, I heard the corrections was great too. I'll read that, but that came out days. That's an interesting thing. The corrections was published days, 3 or 4 days before 9/11 happened. So, interesting. A fan of the show was asking about the great American novel. What do I believe is the great American novel? Or, he read McCarthy, and I think he had mentioned some others, but he was having trouble getting a feel for what was distinctly American about a book, about, the American tone. And as far as modern books, I can't recommend one more distinctly American, whatever that means, than Freedom. Sure, you have Hemingway, and you have Faulkner, and you have Kerouac, and you have Joan Didion or Eve Babbitt, and you have Bukowski, and you have all of these, you have DeLillo, McCarthy, Pynchon, all of these people, these very unique voices. This is really a video in and of itself. What is American? What is a great American novel? What is a great American novel? Maybe I should just leave this question unanswered and go from there. Because this great nation of ours, and I don't say that in irony, I really believe, I love America. I love America. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful country, especially after traveling. I love it here. I was like, rah, 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 when I was a teenager, but you know what, man? Fuck it. I love America. I love this place. Love it. Because this great nation of ours is constantly dividing and uniting based on whatever kind of identity politics or pop culture trends or the shellfire of this new megalo-info Goliath, capturing the essence of America, taking into account not only the West Coast, the East Coast, but, the rest of the fucking country is quite a challenge. Quite a challenge. It's like when you have too much to do and you're swimming in anxiety. When you have so much shit all around you, like literally stuff, just stuff screaming at you, just too much to do. So much stuff screaming at your attention that you're paralyzed. You cannot get anything done, and you have to zoom in. You have to zoom in on a single task. You have to focus on a particular task and getting this little task done. Then, when that's done, moving along, doing the same thing with the next one, moving along in this fashion, in this order. And slowly but surely, you reach this point of productivity, zooming in and ignoring all of the other stuff. And you keep repeating that with each successive issue. And then, after some time, all of a sudden, you have a picture of what you're capable of, and you've accomplished something enormous. That's the metaphor I'm using for Franzen's great American novel, which is, I think, a term that he probably detests but realizes that there's something, I think he said there's a little value in it. And I agree. But, it's kind of just, casually dished out to, oh, the great American novel. I want to read the great Australian novel. It's kind of like the American dream. A filmmaker friend of mine was obsessed with that. He was trying to figure that out. The fuck is the American dream? I'll tell you what the American dream is. The American dream is bitching about books on YouTube for a job. I win. Like I said, it's just so big. There are so many different stories and cultures and minutiae that compose this machine of a country, this giant entity. How could you possibly begin to convey all of the perspectives and make everybody happy? So he went small. He used a fixed zoom lens, pulled focus, and what is revealed is something beautiful, distinctly American, and wise. This is a book that, after all, took 8 years to complete, one of which was the actual writing of it. He was trying to write a book that would be relatable to as many Americans as possible, on average. You know, whatever class, lower, middle, upper. This can sound like aiming for the lowest common denominator, which is sort of like the literary equivalent of like Soylent Pap or something. But the result is quite the opposite, I assure you. It achieves this goal while keeping its integrity and remaining interesting, remaining engaging. So is it a great American novel? Well, if you actually care, fuck yeah it is. Because of Franzen's friendship with DFW, I was afraid to take the plunge. I was afraid that it was going to sound like David Foster Wallace, who I don't care to listen to. I was happy to realize that despite its categorical lumping, which would probably involve the word realism, I'm far more charmed by Franzen. I'm far more interested in Franzen. When you think of the term realism, what comes to mind? What comes to my mind is the serious author, the quiet, studious person of lived experience. Worked hard all his life, informing little old you that this is the way things are. The term is almost designed in its nature to intimidate you, because it suggests that what you shall find in this book by this realist author is the truth, and everything else is pure fiction. It's mere fiction. Mere triviality. One of the things I want to do as a novelist is go looking in places where people aren't looking, says Franzen. He's peering into the intimate areas of the mind. The selfish, the competitive, the neurotic, the insecure, deeply tragic realms that bind us together as this thing called human. Katz made his way down Church Street towards the PATH train, under a familiar cloud of post-interview remorse. He wasn't worried about having given offense. His business was giving offense. He was worried about having sounded pathetic, too transparently the washed-up talent whose only recourse was to trash his betters. He strongly disliked the person he just demonstrated afresh that he unfortunately was, and this, of course, was the simplest definition of depression that he knew of, strongly disliking yourself. Franzen's ability to concisely articulate and navigate the complex human interior is a skill that I have deep admiration for. What happens when you settle for the practical over the desirable? What happens when you live in a position that requires no struggle, that has no conflict? Will you create struggle for yourself, whether internal or external, beginning with internal and then externalized through the mistreatment of other people in your family? Is freedom all it's cracked up to be? Do we really want freedom, and what does that even mean, and does it really matter? The struggle is kind of real. Most of the struggle, the conflict in freedom, is internal. I'm getting older and I'm seeing this world opening up, blooming, with these issues and priorities and problems that really don't concern the vast majority of people in this country under 30. Yet these problems aren't new to people. It wasn't as though they weren't instilled and merely transmitted, compounded, exponentially grown and cultivated, before being unleashed like a cancer. It all starts from certain traits, certain habits. And unless those habits are broken, unless you consciously change them, they will catch up with you. They will find where you've been hiding and where you've been able to kid yourself for so long. And unless you take responsibility for the person looking at you in the mirror, that person will murder you. Humans are the only things on this planet that consciously and actively pity and hate themselves. We are the only thing that, by our own nature, willfully sabotages itself, right? Where did the self-pity come from? The inordinate volume of it. By almost any standards, she led a luxurious life. She had all day, every day, to figure out some decent and satisfying way to live, and yet all she ever seemed to get for all her choices and all her freedom was more miserable. The autobiographer is almost forced to the conclusion that she pitied herself for being so free. And we destroy other species in the process. We are a cancer on the planet, as Walter says in his vitriolic climactic speech. Very impressive. Whether or not you agree or disagree with him, you can't help but recognize and applaud his courage. His whole concern is overpopulation, because there are 13 million people being born every month, and soon we'll be living in a state that mirrors certain areas of Calcutta, or at least that's the theory. It's a frightening image, and it's a very interesting subject, And of course, the whole focus on population plays into all of his inner familial conflict. So much of this is all about family, mothers, sons, daughters, and fathers. Show me a great male author, and I'll show you a man with tremendous, tremendous daddy issues. If there is any author, and I mean this with absolute sincerity, if there is any great, profound male author you can think of who had an idyllic relationship with his father, I would love to know about it. I cannot think of one. I don't mean that they all hated their father. I just mean that the trend is that there is some sort of irreconcilable or unresolvable conflict in their lives, usually involving dad. And now to briefly move on to sons and mothers, I'd like to personally thank Jonathan Franzen for validating that which I have always thought, but had not yet said on this channel. I hate D.H. Lawrence. I shortened this a little bit, but this is what Franzen said. The one writer I completely couldn't stand was D.H. Lawrence. I wanted to kill him for having inflicted Sons and Lovers on me. The book became a shining example of how not to approach this radioactive material, incest. A reminder of the pressing need to find a structure and a tone and a point of view that would ironize it enough to make it fun. No shit! God, that book is dull! It's like 600 pages, so it was a lot of time investment. I shortened this up a little bit. I think he said he went and revisited it and found some good stuff that applied to Walter's kids, Joey and Jessica. But, dude, I really hated that book. Truly, truly bored. Anyways, you should go ahead and read it anyways and have your own opinion about it. It's not garbage and it's not bullshit, It's, like I said, he's a good author. He's a good writer. But the way he did that book was just, like, why would I ever spend that much time with the man? God! Bored me to tears. Freedom nearly brought me to tears in a whole nother way, in the good way, where I was just sitting there and it was like, the carpets tugged out from under you, almost like in like a Disney film where they just flip that switch, man, and you can't feel manipulated because it was so perfectly built up, admirably so, in its craft, and you're just sitting there like 4 a.m. struggling, you're like, I'm not gonna cry, fuck, but it is just, dude, it's fucking devastating. So it's great. If you're a fan of DF Dubs, you've probably already read this book. If you like Ellis or you're a fan of William Gaddis and the Recognitions, which inspired Franzen, I highly recommend you pick this one up. If you were a little reluctant like me and thought this was going to be all about waspy East Coast people written by some waspy dude, then it is about waspy people, but it is Jonathan Franzen is not his characters, certainly not that much, and it is a pleasure to read him. It is a pleasure to read Jonathan Franzen. It is obvious that he follows his own advice, which he gives great advice for writers, and I think the first one was that, the reader is not an adversary. The reader is a friend. And he follows that. He really does. He practices what he preaches. Despite the complex web of painful familial relationships, this story, this book, is fun. I know. Fun to read. It's fun to read. Better than food. Please subscribe if you have not already. Click the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Always remember that life is far too short to read bullshit or D.H. Lawrence. If you support $1 or more on Patreon, you can check out my latest private vlog entry wherein I talk about optioning the rights to this novel, Story of the Eye, and how I went about it, which may be of some great use to you if you are a young person who is interested in making a film based off of a novel. Franzen was worried about novels the same way Bret, Easton, Ellis, and subsequently I am worried about the state of films, or independent film or art film, So I go into that in great length. It's like a 40-minute vlog, and I think that, if you are interested in those subjects, then you should check it out. Really appreciate it. Thanks to all of those who have supported already. Hope you guys are doing well. Please subscribe, and I will see you soon. Yeah. A lot of changes, a lot more stuff to come. Take care of yourselves. Have a good one. Read the book. Ciao. We're all gonna die.